I'm Matt Hart. Today's just a real quick video to help support you on this journey you're on. And um, I think important to know is I've been in this world for 25 years, but more importantly, I'm a dad. I have three kids, and I've actually been on the therapeutic journey myself as a parent. So I've been there with the heartache, with the hope, with the frustration, with the doubt, and the worries. And I think one thing very common uh, for parents to experience and kids to experience when they go into treatment is that rescue me call. And that's a topic for this quick video here is to give you some support if you receive a rescue me call. And, typically what that is that, most people never raise their hand and say, I want to go into treatment, right? Kids may know they need treatment, right? And treatment means change. Treatment means being vulnerable. Treatment also means taking on some responsibility rather than putting it out on other people. And one thing I always keep in mind is the development of our kids' mind, right? That prefrontal cortex is not fully developed. And a lot of our kids, or generally, adolescents and young adults think more with the emotional side of the brain, right? So how they feel really affects how they're thinking, right? And if you're a parent, you've probably heard from your kid, we all have, you don't understand me, you don't get me. Um, and and uh and that can be really frustrating, right? It's frustrating for us, and it's really frustrating for our kids, you know. So I'm just putting that in the back of your mind when I go through the rescue me call. So I'm going to give you an example of the rescue me call I received too. I find a lot of parents find it very familiar to their own, right? And so my child is in treatment for a handful of days. Went there okay. Um, Knew they needed it. Um, and it wasn't easy, but they went. And a couple days in, I got that call, right? And that call went like this: Dad, we made a mistake. I'm not like anybody here. Everybody's a drug addict. They're all sicker than me. Staff are jerks. Food sucks. I'm bored. We haven't done anything. I haven't seen my therapist yet. Please let me come home. I know what I did was wrong. If you let me come home, I'll be safe. If you love me, you'll let me come home, right? That's the call I got. And when I think about how to respond, right? Because we want to make sure our kids feel okay, right? And they're trying to convince us in that moment to bring me home, you know? And so the first thing I do, keeping in mind they think, with how they feel, right? So my job in that moment is not to convince them why they need treatment, right? Because their brains work in the opposite. Their brain's saying, I need to get out of here. I need to convince my parent to bring me home, right? So first thing I do is connect with how my kid feels. And what I do is I practice what's called reflective listening. So I repeat back to me what my kid just said, right? As best as I can, right? And when I'm doing that, what's happening for my kid is that they're feeling understood because I'm repeating back what they're saying. I'm not trying to convince them and tell them something else. So I said, sweetheart, sounds like you're having a really hard day. Sounds like you feel everybody there is a drug addict, that they're sicker than you, that the staff are jerks. You haven't seen your therapist, the food sucks. Sounds like it's a really difficult moment for you, right? I repeat back what my kids said, right? And then I don't try to convince them and say something along the lines, that, well, you really need to be there. When you were home, you were self-harming, or you were suicidal, or you were in the hospital, or whatever was happening, right? I don't say those things because those are going to make it difficult for our kid to feel connected, right? They're going to feel shamed, right? Even if those are the reasons why they're there. So I don't say that. Well, I say something about myself, right? So what I said after I did the reflective listening, I said, for me, sweetheart, the best way I know how to support you as your father is not to bring you home, right? So it was about me. It wasn't about my kid, right? It's easier to argue, or our kids will argue if it's about them. You're wrong, Dad. You don't understand, and so on. But I say, for me, as your father, the best way I know how to support you is not to bring you home, right? That's about me. And it's about saying a healthy boundary. And then last thing I do in that moment is I try to give hope or some control back to my kid. Because a lot of times they can feel like they have no control in their life at this moment, right? That's where some of this stuff can resonate from. So I might ask my kid, I might say, maybe there's somebody there you can talk to about how you're feeling right now, right? Or, do you think there's somebody there you can talk to about how you're feeling right now, right? They may say no, and that's okay, right? Because their goal is to have you bring them home, right? And then if they say no, then I give them that hope. And I say, sweetheart, I hope maybe you can find somebody there then that you can talk to. I'm gonna go now. I love you. You know, I hope we can talk in a couple days. And I hang up the phone. And there's a couple really important parts of that, right? First, like I said, I'm trying to give my kids some control, right? And if they don't feel like, yeah, I can talk to somebody right now, if they're not at that point, right? And they're still trying to get through, then I give them that hope, right? You know, I hope that, you can think about and find somebody, right? So I'm not telling my kid what to do. I'm not, right? Because they feel like they don't have control. So if I say, hey, sweetheart, you should really talk to your therapist about how you're feeling right now, right? That's going to go sideways in the way their brain's working, right? So my hope is that maybe you can find somebody, right? Um, and the other thing, and this could be the hardest part of this call, for a parent, is to hang up, right? And like I said earlier, our kids think with how they feel. When our kids go limbic, when they're really accessing, or disconnecting from the forming prefrontal cortex and more in their limbic system, two significant things happen. One, and that's for this point right here. One is the stop mechanism in the brain that says, okay, this isn't working. I need to stop. That shuts off. And that's when our kids spiral. And a lot of us have experienced that, right? And our kids just going and going and going, and we're trying to get them to stop, right? And we can't, and they can't, because that part of their brain is actually like hijacked and they can't access it, right? So we actually do our kids a favor when we hang up the phone, and I hang it up with love, and I let my kid know, sweetheart, I'm going to go now. I love you. I hope we can talk in a couple days, right? And I hang up. And what I do, or what happens for our kids when we do that, is that, stress on the brain, which is making their zone of tolerance really thin, that stress on the brain is stress because they're trying to convince us to take them home. When we leave the conversation, that stress leaves their brain, right? And I've worked in programs for years. Typically, what happens is there's always a staff in the phone call rooms, right? They're there to support the kids. And usually, what happens, kid hangs up the phone. And the staff goes, hey, it sounds like you had a hard call. Do you want to talk about it? More than often, the kids will be like, nope, I'm fine. And they go off and do whatever activity, right? Because we are gone. The stress is gone, right? And we weren't shaming them in that moment. So they're not feeling really bad. What they're feeling is like, okay, I tried to do this. There was a boundary held, and you walked away from the conversation, right? The other times, there are times when a kid goes, yeah, I really could use somebody to talk to about, and that's awesome too. because now that kid's opening up and they're talking. So to recap it real quick, our kids will usually call us a few days in and try to convince us why they don't need to be there or why this is the wrong program and so on. So, reflective listening, I hear you, sweetheart. Sounds like you're having a really hard time. And I repeat back what they say. Doesn't mean I agree with it. I'm just connecting with how their brain is functioning. And then I set the healthy boundary. For me, as your father, the best way I know how to support you is not to bring you home. And then I give a little control and the hope, you know, is there somebody you can talk to there about how you're feeling right now? My hope is that you can find somebody. I'm going to go now. I love you. I hope in a couple days we can talk again. And I hang up, right? So, anyways, that's the rescue me call. This is just, a sample and something a lot of parents experience. Usually I have this call or this conversation a couple days in or maybe a week in the treatment. And parents are like, oh, I wish I knew this before. So this is your before. So I hope you've watched this. I hope you find it helpful. And just from one parent to another. I think sometimes it's not where we thought we would want to be or where we want to be, but it's where we need to be right now. And you're giving your kid a gift, right? You're giving your kid a chance at the future and support to help themselves find their own strength in life, right? Rather than just kind of relying on other people. So, anyways, thank you again. And I hope to speak with you soon. All right.